So let's have a look now at internal, operating, and macro factors. So some examples that may lead to decline in each of these categories. First of all, let's have a look at what each of these mean. So you can think of these different categories as sort of being like a house of sorts. So your internal is all the people and things that are going on inside of the house. You've got the owners and managers and the employees. So you can also think of it like a business, all the people inside. And then part of that is also the structure, the building structure and the culture of how all of those people work together and what that situation is like. So that's internal. Operating is more of sort of the outside, I suppose, where it is the walls of the building. You've got customers, competitors, suppliers, and interest groups. So all of the different people who make the business go around, you've got all of those people who are going to be influencing decisions and the way that the business can operate. Because if a competitor does something, then you need to monitor that and you need to make sure you're not falling behind. Suppliers impact operations because you're reliant on them for making sure you've got stock for whatever it is that you sell. And of course, customers, you rely on them to keep your business moving. And macro is the big things that are sort of out floating around in the air. You've got your STEEPLE acronym, which you may be familiar with all of the analytical tools that you've done before. So it stands for sociocultural, technological, economic, environmental, political, legal, and ethical. So all of those different things that can be going on in the business environment that are going to have some kind of impact. So now if we look at examples that lead to decline, potentially, in terms of internal, you may have poor quality employees and customer service, and that is going to then lead to poor customer satisfaction and potential reputational damage. And all of this has a flow on effect to potentially mean the business will decline. And keep in mind that there's different levels of this. So, yes, a business may have poor quality employees, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're in decline. It's sort of how bad it is that's going to determine whether they actually are going to decline as a result. There are plenty of businesses out there um, that have lots of complaints that people aren't happy with, but they still generate enough revenue to continue operating as is, and they haven't entered that decline phase. You also may have not adapting leadership and management styles to suit the business's needs. That can impact as well. And we'll have a look at an example in a moment that may relate to that. Now, operating environmental factors, you could fail to monitor competitors. Like I mentioned before, that's really important to make sure you're not falling behind in the market. And if you don't do that, then you potentially will not have that level of innovation, that level of meeting the demands of customers, and that could then result in decline. And also not pursuing suppliers with the best cost efficiency. So you don't want to rest on your laurels with suppliers, just continue with the same supplier without monitoring the market and looking at options that may be better than what you've currently got. And so failing to do that could mean a business is going to go into decline. Also keep in mind that some of these things may sort of join together to result in decline. It's not always going to be one thing. Because, for example, not monitoring competitors or not pursuing suppliers with the best pricing doesn't really sound like a big enough deal to result in a whole established business collapsing. And it probably wouldn't be. It would be a range of different things that may lead to that decline. But these are just examples of some of the things that may be in the mix with what's having that impact. Now, macro environmental factors, a classic example that you probably can think of yourself is COVID-19. So, heaps of businesses went into administration back in 2020 and beyond that as well, because of the changes that resulted from COVID-19. So, not being able to travel, and all those sorts of things had huge impacts on businesses like Flight Centre, for example, and the different airlines. Those are really clear examples there. A few other examples. So, in terms of internal, Twitter, or now it's called X, they had some problems back when Elon Musk took over, and you could consider that sort of internal things that led to decline. So, the business may not have continued to decline, but it's probably not as strong as it used to be. So, the different things that went into that, owners and managers. So the way that the management style was happening, um, they laid off lots of different employees. They were demanding more from employees, wanting people to work longer hours and those sorts of things. And then I guess those things have an impact then on organizational structure with the way that the employee hierarchy is set out, and then the culture as well. Getting rid of employees without sort of looking after them, without having um, sort of things that you would expect with the way that that is done, um, can impact the culture, and then the structure where you are putting more of a burden on existing employees because of getting rid of lots of other employees. It's all going to impact the structure and the culture, and those things can all come together to potentially result in the business declining. A macro example, PwC, which is a financial consultancy kind of company in Australia. It had a bit of a scandal last year in that it had some issues with the different practices that it was carrying out in that finance kind of sector, and that resulted in some legal, political, and ethical issues around that. And I believe that in 2023 it had a huge decline in its accounting sector, for example, something like $125 million lost in revenue compared to the previous year. So, those are some examples that we may be familiar with in terms of decline.